Okay, so Blackwater.
Whoa.
Right.
Yeah.
Diving into the deep end with this one.
Yeah.
Um, Not every day you get a glimpse inside, like, the world of private military contractors in Iraq.
Right.
We've got
I'm kidding.
stacks of source material for this one.
Oh, yeah.
But we're really going to zero in on the memoir of Morgan Lerette.
Okay.
He's a Blackwater contractor, spent 2004 to 2006 right in the thick of it.
Wow.
And our mission here, it's not to like play judge and jury.
Right.
You know, it's really just to understand what he experienced,
Yeah.
grapple with the ethical complexities,
For sure.
and see how this whole experience, you know,
Yeah.
how this time stayed with him.
It's easy to form opinions from a distance, but firsthand accounts like Lerette's, that's gold.
Totally.
Get that understanding, that visceral understanding that you just can't get from the headlines.
Yeah. So picture this, okay?
Okay.
Lerette lands in Baghdad, 2005.
Okay.
The U.S.-led invasion has just turned everything upside down. He walks off the plane, and instead of tight security, what does he find?
What?
Lax airport checks.
Oh, wow.
Mountains of ammunition just lying around.
Really?
Contractors casually having a beer,
What?
like they're on holiday,
No.
not in war zone.
It's wild, right? It speaks to the surreal atmosphere of that time.
Yeah.
Like, imagine a nation struggling to rebuild. Basic services are barely functioning.
Yeah.
Tensions are simmering everywhere, and into that chaos walks a private army, essentially.
It's like, talk about a culture clash.
Yeah.
And gets even wilder.
Okay.
So Lerette tells this story.
Okay.
Some Blackwater guys, they mistake celebratory gunfire in the green zone,
Oh, no.
supposed safe zone.
Right.
They mistake it for a full-blown attack.
Oh, geez.
So they go on high alert, start firing their weapons.
You're kidding?
Thankfully, no one was hurt.
Oh, my gosh.
But imagine the confusion,
I can't imagine.
the sheer tension of that moment.
Yeah, it highlights a critical issue. These contractors, often coming from a very different world, were thrown into a pressure cooker
Yeah.
without a full understanding of the environment or the rules of engagement, what we call ROEs.
Right, the ROEs.
Yeah, for those unfamiliar, ROEs are the strict guidelines for when and how military force can be used.
Right.
And in a chaotic environment like that, misinterpreting a situation,
Yeah.
like mistaking celebration for hostility, could have had devastating consequences.
And speaking of stressful situations,
Okay.
he doesn't sugarcoat the day-to-day realities either.
Right.
Oh, he talks about the dreaded Baghdad bug.
Oh, God.
This nasty stomach bug that ripped through the ranks.
Yeah.
The constant fear of rocket attacks.
I can't imagine.
Can you imagine living under that kind of pressure?
Oh, it's got to take a toll.
Never knowing when the next attack might hit.
Yeah, imagine the psychological impact.
Yeah.
Operating in that kind of environment where danger is always lurking.
Right.
And even basic comforts are hard to come by.
He even jokes about how the only time they were truly worried was when the internet went down during a rocket attack.
Oh my God.
Dark humor.
Yeah.
Right. But it makes you wonder,
Yeah.
what does that say about the coping mechanisms
Yeah, for sure.
they relied on just to function in that pressure cooker?
They had to build up that armor.
Yeah.
You know, finding humor in the darkest of places,
Right.
just to deal with that constant stress and uncertainty.
But let's dive into the actual work a little bit.
Okay.
Protecting convoys on Route Irish.
Oh, man.
This notorious stretch of road riddled with IEDs.
Route Irish. Just the name sent chills down people's spines.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine. Every vehicle could be a bomb, every turn a potential ambush.
Oh, talk about an adrenaline rush.
It was a daily dance with death.
And Lerette tells this chilling anecdote, right?
Okay.
So picture this. He's on a convoy,
Okay.
sees a young kid waving from the side of the road,
Okay.
and his training kicks in.
Um.
He almost pulls the trigger, thinking it's a distraction.
Oh,
A setup for an attack.
wow.
Luckily, he realizes just in time. But it's a stark reminder of how on edge they were.
Right.
How fine the line was between a friendly gesture
Yeah.
and a perceived threat.
That story, I mean, that gets at the psychological conditioning that
Yeah.
happened in that environment.
Yeah.
That split-second decision-making.
Right.
The constant threat assessment.
Right.
It's a lot to process.
It is.
You see how quickly someone can go from potential threat back to reality, right?
Ah.
It makes you think about the potential for desensitization to violence.
Oh, for sure.
When every day could be your last,
Right.
how do you maintain your humanity?
Yeah.
It's a question that haunts many who've experienced war firsthand.
Right. So, besides protecting convoys,
Yeah.
they had this whole other responsibility. escorting principals.
Okay.
Basically, anyone important,
Right.
diplomats, politicians, high-profile figures, and let's just say Lerette doesn't hold back on his opinions of some of them.
Ah, the principles. Yeah.
It's so fascinating.
Right.
You have these individuals often far removed from the realities of war,
Right.
being protected by men like Lerette, who are risking their lives every single day.
Every single day.
It creates a unique dynamic, to say the least.
It does.
It really does.
Lerette has this whole story about escorting John Bolton and his team.
Okay.
They're holed up in this luxurious palace,
Wow.
while the contractors are stuck in a rundown shack nearby.
Oh, man.
They even joked that Bolton's bathroom breaks were longer than their sleep cycles.
Oh, my God.
There's a stark class contrast there.
Oh, absolutely. The haves and the have-nots, even in a war zone.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder who was really fighting whom and for what.
It's a rabbit hole,
Not
for sure.
For sure.
But speaking of unwinding, after a day of, dodging IEDs and escorting VIPs,
Right.
let's talk about what these guys did in their downtime.
Downtime, huh? I don't know if I'd call it that.
Yeah.
It often seemed like just a different kind of battlefield.
Yeah. Battling boredom, tension, and the psychological weight of what they were experiencing.
Right.
Right.
Lerette doesn't shy away from the raw details.
Right.
Constant drinking, obsession with sex,
Yeah,
basically anything to numb the pressure,
sure.
to feel something other than fear or boredom.
It's a coping mechanism, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're living on a knife's edge, healthy outlets for stress are hard to come by.
Yeah.
These guys were trying to grab a hold of some semblance of normalcy,
Yeah.
even if it meant pushing the boundaries a bit.
It makes you wonder how much of that normal was just a facade,
Right.
a way to cope with the intensity of it all.
For sure.
Lerette even describes this bet they had.
Okay.
They called it the combat whack.
Oh, boy.
Who, well, you
Sure.
can probably guess.
Yeah.
It's crude, for sure.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting what it reveals about their mindset.
It's about more than just sex.
Right.
It's about control.
Yeah.
In a situation where death felt omnipresent, they were grasping for agency, for a sense of power,
Yeah.
even in the most primal of ways.
It's a side of war we don't really talk about that much.
Right.
That to feel something, anything other than fear.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets even more complicated.
Okay.
Lerette starts to question the lines they were crossing,
Right.
the moral gray areas,
Yeah.
that came with the territory.
Yeah.
He talks about stories of looting,
Oh, wow.
violence against locals, even whispers of things that could be considered war crimes.
That's heavy.
Initially, there was this sense of impunity,
Yeah.
like they were above the well.
Right.
But as time went on, that started to wear on Lerette.
That's the danger, right?
Yeah.
Operating in a vacuum like that, outside the traditional rules of engagement, it's a slippery slope from bending the rules to breaking them,
Totally.
and from seeing yourself as the protector to becoming the aggressor.
And these weren't isolated incidents either.
Right.
Lerette talks about this gradual shift in his own thinking, how he went from accepting these things
Right.
to being deeply troubled by them.
It speaks to the whole idea of moral injury. Something a lot of veterans grapple with. It's not just the physical wounds of war, but the wounds to the soul,
Right.
The guilt and shame that come from doing things that go against your values, even if you felt you had no other choice.
And those wounds, they don't just disappear when you leave the battlefield.
No, not at all.
Lerette's story is, it's a stark example of that.
Yeah.
He comes home, his marriage falls apart.
Oh, man.
He's drinking heavily, can't seem to connect with people anymore.
It's classic PTSD.
Yeah,
But even back then, in the mid-2000s,
right.
the understanding and support for veterans struggling with those invisible wounds,
Yeah.
it was nowhere near where it needed to be.
Imagine being thrown back into a world that's moved on
Right.
while you're stuck in the trenches of your own mind,
Yeah.
replaying every firefight,
Right.
every close call.
Every moral compromise. It's a recipe for isolation and despair.
And there's this incredibly poignant moment in the book.
Okay.
Lerette finds himself in a college class.
Okay.
This is not long after the Virginia Tech shooting.
Oh, wow.
Another student asks, how could someone do that?
Right.
How could they kill so many people?
Right.
And Lerette's response is chilling, he says. With that kind of firepower, he's like, I could have killed even more.
Wow.
It sends chills down your spine.
Yeah.
It speaks to the desensitization to violence,
For sure.
that can happen after prolonged exposure to conflict.
Right.
It's like a defense mechanism, right?
Right.
A way to cope with the constant threat of death.
Yeah.
But what happens when that numbness, that detachment,
Right.
it spills over into civilian life?
Yeah, it's like a ticking time bomb almost.
Right.
Yeah.
And Lerette wasn't alone in this.
No.
He talks about other contractors battling addiction,
Sure.
struggling to relate to loved ones,
Yeah.
unable to escape the shadow of war.
Trauma has a way of doing that.
Yeah.
It can rewire your brain,
Yeah.
change how you perceive the world and how you interact with others.
Right.
And for those who experience the intensity of places like Iraq,
Right.
those scars, those invisible wounds,
Yeah.
they can run incredibly deep.
It's a sobering thought
Yeah.
that even when the fighting stops,
Right.
the battle within can rage on.
Absolutely.
And it makes you wonder, what are our responsibilities
Right.
to those who've borne the weight of war,
Right.
who've witnessed things that most of us can't even imagine?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do we as a society
Yeah.
support our veterans,
Sure.
acknowledge their sacrifices,
Right.
create spaces for healing and reintegration?
Yeah.
And it's not just about providing healthcare and benefits.
Right.
It's about understanding the invisible wounds,
Yeah.
the moral injuries,
Yeah.
the lasting impact of those experiences.
It's about bridging that gap, right?
Exactly.
Between those who served and those who haven't.
Yeah,
Between the world they left behind
right.
and the one they returned to.
It's huge.
And stories like Lerette's,
Yeah,
as uncomfortable as they can be,
for sure.
can help us start those conversations.
Totally.
Challenge us to confront the human cost of war,
As
all its complexity.
Yeah, because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's about more than just geopolitics and military strategy.
Right.
It's about the individuals caught in the crosshairs,
Yeah.
those asked to carry the weight of our collective decisions.
Yeah.
Lorette's story, for all its darkness,
Right.
it's ultimately a testament to resilience,
Yeah.
to the enduring human spirit.
It's like trying to piece together this puzzle
Yeah,
where some of the pieces are they're missing,
right.
and the ones you do have are morally gray.
It's easy to get caught up in the individual stories,
Yeah.
the adrenaline, the chaos,
Right.
but we can't lose sight of the bigger picture here.
Right.
Blackwater and other private military contractors, they were operating in this legal and ethical gray zone, right?
Right.
I mean, what happens when you have private companies waging war, essentially?
Yeah. It's a slippery slope.
Who's accountable when things go wrong?
Right.
I mean, these are questions that are still being debated today.
Yeah. And you have to wonder, what happens to a society when we outsource war to the highest bidder?
Right.
It's not just about the immediate conflict,
No.
but the ripple effects
Of course.
it has on our values, our sense of shared humanity.
It raises these really fundamental questions about the nature of war itself.
Yeah.
What are the long-term consequences for the individuals who fight these wars
Yeah.
and for the societies that wage them?
Yeah.
Lorette's story, it throws these questions into sharp relief.
It really does.
This blend of bravery and trauma, and moral wrestling.
Yeah, one thing that I kept coming back to was
Yeah.
how casual violence seemed to become for some of these guys. Lerette talks about how it changed, how he saw the world,
Right.
how it just seeped into his everyday life.
It's chilling.
It's changed.
That desensitization to violence, it's a very real consequence of
Yeah.
prolonged exposure to conflict.
Right.
It's like a defense mechanism,
Right.
It's a way to cope with that constant threat of death.
Right.
But then what happens when that numbness,
Yeah.
that detachment, it spills over into civilian life?
It's like a ticking time bomb.
It really is.
And Lerette wasn't alone in this.
No, not at all.
He talks about other contractors battling addiction,
Of course.
struggling to relate to their loved ones,
Right.
unable to escape the shadow of war.
Trauma has a way of doing that,
Re-
rewiring your brain, changing how you see the world, how you interact with others.
Right.
And for those who experienced the intensity of places like Iraq,
Yeah.
those scars, those invisible wounds, they run deep.
It's a sobering thought that even when the fighting stops, the battle within rages on.
Absolutely.
And it makes me wonder,
Yeah.
what are our responsibilities to those
Right.
who've borne the weight of war,
Yeah.
who've seen things
Yeah.
that most of us can't even imagine?
It's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
How do we as a society
Yeah.
support our veterans,
Yeah.
acknowledge their sacrifices,
Right.
create a space for healing and reintegration?
And it's not just about providing healthcare and benefits.
Right.
It's about understanding, the invisible wounds.
Yes.
The moral injuries, the lasting impact of these experiences.
It's about bridging that gap.
Right.
Between those who've served and those who haven't.
Yes.
Between the world they left behind and the world they come back to.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And stories like Lerette's,
Yeah.
as uncomfortable as they can be,
They're tough to hear.
they can help us start those conversations.
They can, yeah.
Challenge us to confront the human cost of war in all of its complexity.
Absolutely, because it's about more than just the geopolitics. It's about the military strategy.
Yeah.
It's about the individuals caught in the crosshairs.
Right.
The ones asked to shoulder the burden,
Yeah.
to carry the weight of our collective decisions. Lerette's story, for all its darkness,
Yeah.
it's ultimately a testament to resilience,
Yeah.
to the enduring human spirit.
It makes you realize that, understanding Blackwater,
Yeah.
it's not just about, analyzing military tactics or
Right.
like corporate structures.
It's deeper than that.
It's about grappling with these profound and often uncomfortable truths about human nature,
Yeah.
about the choices that we make in the face of chaos and uncertainty,
Absolutely.
and about the enduring impact that those choices have on individuals
For sure.
and societies
Yes.
long after the dust settles.
The long tail.
Yeah. So as you delve deeper into this topic, I'd leave you with this.
Okay.
How does understanding the human cost of private military companies like Blackwater, how does it challenge your own perspective on war,
Right.
on accountability,
Right.
and our collective responsibility
It's a big one.
to those who serve?
Huge.
It's a question worth pondering.
It really is.